I think Wilson Fisk may have died at the end of Hawkeye. It certainly looks like he's been killed. But how much does death really matter in the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Yeah, I don't think he's actually dead, to be fair, because he's coming back for Daredevil Born Again. Or maybe they'll find some way to bring him back to life. Who knows?
They do have a multiverse.
That is the state of Daredevil as of She-Hulk Attorney at Law. Seems like we're going to see Matt Murdock. I don't know what context. Like, is it going to be a quick cameo, or is it going to be a meaningful episode arc, a multi-episode arc? Who knows? But I think there's a reason a lot of people are really interested in his return to the MCU, and hopefully we've eliminated some of them during our conversation just now. So
Yeah, and another interesting thing is that the way Jen Walters is a lawyer, Matt Murdock is also a lawyer.
whoa.
Yeah. Did you know
Wow.
that? Did you know
Did you
that?
come up with that yourself, dude?
I did. Yeah, I'm the
That's
first person
amazing.
to draw that connection.
You really put that together. Great job.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.
All right, folks, you're listening to or watching Decoding TV, and we're talking about She-Hulk, Season 1, Episode 6. Just Jen. I'm David Chen. He's Siddhant Adlaka. Siddhant, let's talk about overall thoughts on this episode, which does appear to be following the same formula as the other episodes, right? Like, Jen deals with something in her personal life, or there is a court case that may or may not be attached to whatever she's doing or connected to whatever she's doing. So what'd you think?
Before we get right into it, so I have to say I watched this episode in kind of a foggy, groggy state because I had just gotten my COVID booster, and unfortunately, it didn't turn me mean and green. It just made me very sleepy. But that being said, like it feels like the perfect show to watch when you're experiencing the side effects of a vaccine, because it's just it's fun, you know. As soon as you start, as soon as you start zoning out, the episode just kind of ends out of nowhere. So that's great. But again, like I can't really complain too much, even about these episodes having no real actual endings, because it's a lot of fun along the way. Like this week's two, A plot and B plot, the two plots don't really have anything to do with each other, but individually, each one is, it's enjoyable, it's light, it's a good time.
In the A plot, Jen Walters shows up at her estranged friend Lulu's wedding and encounters Titania, who wants to fight her. She also manages to potentially find some love there at the wedding. So that's the A plot. In the B plot, Mallory and Nikki, Mallory, who is another lawyer at her firm, and Nikki, Jen's paralegal, decide to take on the case of Craig Hollis, otherwise known as Mr. Immortal, played by David Pasquesi, who is basically playing the same character as he played in the HBO original series Veep. If you've seen that show.
I have not.
Oh my gosh. Incredible show. And he basically plays the same dude, which is like a kind of philandering, misogynist, kind of unreliable dude that still manages to seduce a lot of women. So he's awesome in both shows, and I'd highly recommend Veep. But anyway,
thrilled that they are using a version of Mr. Immortal in this show, because Craig Hollis, or Mr. Immortal, was going to be in the New Warriors TV show on Hulu that was eventually canceled in like 2018. And he was going to be like a much younger guy, because in the comics, Mr. Immortal is, just a, young costume superhero.
Yeah.
And he's part of, I believe he first showed up in West Coast Avengers, and then he went on to be part of this group called the Great Lakes Avengers, which is like a fun Avengers subgroup. But this version of him is just like a older, sleazier, ascot wearing, non-superhero guy.
It's a fascinating take, and we were talking about how well some of these Marvel shows are illuminating their themes in the podcast at podcast.decodingtv.com. And we were discussing how Daredevil does a pretty good job of drawing out these themes of what it means to be Catholic, what it means to believe in redemption, and what your perception of justice is. In a similar way, She-Hulk's themes of men are terrible seems to be coming through like in a pretty clear and vivid way on the show. And I say that not backhandedly at all, because of course, if there was a Mr. Immortal, he would use his abilities to skirt any confrontation or responsibility when it comes to his marital and non-marital relationships, right? And I think it's playing off this idea in popular culture that like men often don't like talking about their feelings,
Hmm.
right? And here's a guy who, like, what if you had a man who didn't like talking about his feelings, but he also had superpowers and he could live forever? It's like, what would he do to avoid that kind of thing? Would he go so far as to fake his own death and start a new identity? The answer is probably yes.
Men would
And
rather die than go to therapy.
exactly, 100%.
Oh, that just
100%.
got dark. Oh God.
Men would rather fake their own death and go to
Yes.
therapy. How
Okay,
about
that's
that?
a better way of putting it. But
Men
the
would
thing is,
rather men would
legal.
rather fake their own death, move from woman to woman, having like serial relationships, than go to therapy. Anyway, go ahead.
He does die legally. Like from what he says, like in a legal sense, he is dead. So apparently, his breathing and circulation probably does stop for a second, and then
Uh
he
huh.
just keeps going about his day.
All right. Well, I'm sure the jurors were going to be really sympathetic to that one, but of course, that doesn't happen. And what happens, like the resolution of that plot, is that Nikki finds a way to give every single woman their own custom apology or compensation or retribution or what have you, and that's what ultimately cracks the case wide open.
Hmm.
And it shows you how emotionally intelligent Nikki is. So,
Yay,
anyway,
Nikki.
yeah, yay.
And I like that they're using She-Hulk not just to, flesh out these questions of what would, certain legal cases look like in this world, but it also seems to be like where like the larger shared universe is being fleshed out in very tongue-in-cheek ways.
Mm-hmm.
Because he mentions like he got gold from his wife Baroness Cromwell, which is a reference to a real character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe who has ties to, I kid you not, Dracula. So we can assume from this week's She-Hulk episode that yeah, Dracula probably exists in the MCU.
Wow.
Yeah,
And he also had Apple shares from 1986.
he did. So
So
Steve Jobs existed at one point, and
Steve Jobs exists in the MCU,
yeah.
right? Unless Apple was run by someone else, you know?
Oh, true, true.
Yeah, yeah. Anything else you want to say about this Mr. Immortal storyline? Here's my favorite part of it. Okay, Siddhant, is they make great pains to mention at the beginning of the episode that um, Jennifer Walters' friend Lulu is getting married on a Thursday. And it's very, very weird to get married on a Thursday. And the only reason you get married on a Thursday is so you can intercut between these plot lines, because they wouldn't have these meetings at the law firm on a Saturday, probably.
But the
So
thing is, in big law, like the hours are crazy. You would have people going into the office on a weekend.
yeah, but would you bring like everyone else in there? Like you wouldn't bring all the parties in there to hash things, because you'd need like support
Yeah,
staff and probably like that. So they put
maybe.
that Thursday reference in there just so you could intercut between the wedding and
Yeah,
also this plot line.
yeah.
And that's nice. That's
And
nice. That's a little gift for the nitpickers out there. You know what I mean?
and
So
it's good to know that DJ Ched or the Incredible Hulk has nothing else going on a Thursday, so he can just DJ the wedding.
yes, indeed. That is Jen's cousin, I believe, in the show, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, cousin Ched.
yeah. We also find out at the end of that plot line, by the way, that Mallory has a son and is married, which is like, wow, that's didn't know that backstory. Don't know if those characters will figure into the show at all, but and then they get into this unfortunate online stuff that we'll talk about a little bit later. But then there's the A story, which is Jen going to this wedding with Lulu, and I thought the whole Lulu stuff was very funny, and it raises all these questions about weddings in general, Siddhant.
Mm-hmm.
That we're now going to talk about in a fairly extended tangent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so weddings, who needs them? I think they're a fairly silly ritual. I don't. Any of my comments should not be taken as a commentary on the institution of marriage in any way, which has its own issues. I'm just talking about the idea of a wedding.
Mhm.
To paraphrase Jim Gaffigan, it feels really silly. It's like, we're gonna have a medieval feast and invite people to come present gifts to us, and like we're like having a little miniature kingdom almost. Like it's a little mini kingdom, and everyone's coming, and we're all gonna dress up and hold a party, and it's just an odd just an
Mhm.
odd ritual. But I will say, to be more serious about it, I will say that I would argue that more relationships have been ruined because of weddings than created because of weddings.
Huh.
Um, and I think the reason for that is because with weddings, um, there are often like things are done that I think people find to be very personally offensive or shattering, or there's basically like really high stakes for weddings, right? And if you do something, it is perceived as a potentially huge slight against someone,
Hmm.
that then like is very hard for that. It's very hard for that wound to heal.
What
So
was
anyway,
your wedding like?
it was amazing. But I'm just saying, like we had a lovely wedding. Amazing to see all of our friends, and I thought the ceremony and the reception was awesome. But it's also just like my wife is a very attentive person, and so like we like took notes and make sure to like thank everyone that gave us presents, and like all there's all these like rituals you need to go through, and if you don't do them correctly,
Mhm.
then people get offended, relationships are broken, and so on. Now, I don't think that happened with our wedding, but like I've heard so many stories of it happening, and I think this episode illustrates how stuff like that happens, where like somebody gets so caught up in their own day and what they want it to be like that they end up imposing on other people in ways that they don't anticipate. What is your view of weddings, Siddhant Tlaka?
So, I am very familiar with American Christian weddings just through media, just through TV and movies.
Yeah.
Um, and I've never been to one. I'm sure I will at some point. But the general pop culture idea of a Western wedding is something I'm familiar with, and it seems
Wait,
like
so
it.
you've never been to a Western wedding in your entire life? Is that
No,
correct?
I haven't.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to a lot of weddings, just not again like an American Christian one.
Okay.
Um, like the getting married in a church, saying your vows, and
Yeah, 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 yeah.
family sitting on either side. So I'm familiar with it conceptually. So it's probably not going to be like too much of a shock when I go to one. Um, but yeah, no, weddings for me, like Indian weddings, Hindu weddings, specifically Punjabi weddings, are very very different from that. First of all, they are at least 3 day affairs. Like anything less than 3 days, it's like what's the point? And if there's one thing that Westerners generally know about Indian weddings, is that they're very big and colorful, and they involve like song and dance and stuff like that, which is completely true, even though there's like a lot more to it. But the focus of generally a South Asian wedding is very different. The focus in Western Christian weddings, I should say, tends to be on the bride and groom. Like even just the way it's physically set up, you have the family sitting and facing, this ceremony that's going on with the bride and groom standing there, and they are the central focal point, right? And of course, the bride and groom are absolutely a huge part of an Indian wedding too. Um, but it's just as much about the families coming together. It's just as much about it being a union of families. And so yeah, and again, like I said, it's a lot of fun. And if you like, I can tell you a bit about what generally goes on at one of these if you've never been to one.
I have actually photographed one before,
Oh, okay.
but I haven't been to the full like 3 day affair.
Okay.
But yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, again, it depends. It varies from religion to religion, region to region, all of that. But generally, most of the ones I've been to, the actual wedding part of it lasts 3 days. Although somewhere beforehand, you also have an engagement party, right? So we do like it's become a thing now to like plan and photograph like get down on your knee proposals, like you have in the West. But then you have an official engagement where the families are involved, and there's like a little religious ceremony to get the people engaged. It's an excuse to throw a party like a year in advance. So then the actual wedding part of it usually lasts about 3 days, right? The first day is the reception. And how that normally goes is, at least in my experience, you have the bride and her family already at the location, which is like a ballroom or a banquet hall or some fancy hotel somewhere, like just a space where you can have a lot of people. It can also be like an open air thing that's really nicely decorated. So they're already at the location, and the groom and his family, come from a certain distance away and arrive, and they are welcomed or received, hence the reception term. He rides in on a horse, and usually on the horse he has a little boy with him, like sitting on the horse riding with him, like you have what is it, like flower girls and stuff like that at your
Yeah.
weddings. We
Yeah.
have what's called the sarbala, who sits on the horse, and I've been one of those. As a little
Oh,
kid,
nice.
I was like the little boy on the horse. And then again, depending on your own customs and beliefs, when the two families come together, sometimes you have this thing where um each corresponding family member from each side of the family is introduced to the other, like, oh, the father, the
Yeah.
uncle on the father's side, uncle on the father's side. And I believe that happens at Vietnamese weddings too, although in this case they try and like lift each other up and have like an impromptu wrestling match.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like it's just like a fun little competition to see who can lift who. um so, and then you have the bride and groom sitting down and everyone lining up to meet them, but also you have what to me is like the main event of any Indian wedding, which is the song and dance stuff. So the boys' friends and the girls' friends, or if it's two guys or two girls getting married, each side's friends put on like a little dance performance, and the parents and uncles and aunts, like the older generation, they put on something as well. So it's not exactly a competition, but it's structured like one, like, all right, this side does their dance, this side does their dance, and it's just a lot of fun. And that comes
Yeah.
up in Miss Marvel as well.
So when you see a wedding depicted on a TV show like this, like a Western wedding, like, what is your reaction? As what it feels a lot more. First of all, we didn't even see the wedding in this episode. We should point out, right?
We didn't even see the
Uh,
groom.
yeah. um, but what is kind of your perception of Western weddings? That they're just kind of more sedate affairs? Do you think,
Yeah,
relatively?
yeah,
Yeah.
all the dancing seems to happen like afterwards at like a late night party, which I'm
Yeah.
sure everyone has fun at. But okay, so here's the actual wedding part of the wedding. That's on day 3. On day 2, you have like these little, separate things, like families just sitting, singing, eating together. You have like a henna ceremony for the bride. But the third day is the actual wedding. I've been to a lot of weddings. I don't know that I've actually seen the marriage ceremony part of it, because it is important. So it happens in like this little, this, an area off to the side. And in Hindu weddings, you sit around a fire, and a pandit or a priest will say a prayer, and then you end it by walking hand in hand around the fire, like I think it's like 7 or 12 times or something, I can't really remember. But that part of it, not everyone shows up to watch.
Hmm.
Like it happens, and the expectation is, yeah, watch it if you want, but usually there's like a huge buffet going on elsewhere, and that's where most people are gathered. Like they're just eating and talking and hanging out with each other while the wedding, first of all, everyone is hungover. um so, and then the wedding is just happening off to the side. It's not the main event, like the actual marriage
Yeah.
ceremony.
So basically, Indian wedding. I think what you're saying is Indian weddings take the She-Hulk attorney at law approach, where the actual ceremony itself is of minor importance to everything else that happens.
Pretty much,
In the
pretty
episode.
much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, what is food generally like at weddings here, like at Christian weddings here? Because again, my idea of it comes entirely through pop culture, which is like, would you like the chicken or fish? But what's the food like?
Yeah. It can vary wildly. Sometimes it's like a served meal, like chicken or fish, and then you get your choice. I went to a wedding that took place in a barn once, and they had this gigantic pig, and they kind of like had barbecued or roasted the pig, and people just like ate the pig, and that was,
Hmm.
and with some other refreshments, and that was it. It really depends on what people's style is. I think that is one thing I do appreciate about Western weddings is it is fairly versatile for those who are willing to kind of think outside the box.
Yeah, there's a lot you can, you can personalize it in a way.
Yeah. You can have like a chihuahua in the wedding party, for instance,
Ah,
or a small dog. I don't know if that was a chihuahua in the show,
I think it
but like
was. Yeah,
a small dog in the show. Um,
yeah.
but yeah,
For
go ahead.
I said, for us, it's a little less adaptable, but also like, even though there's not that much variety from wedding to wedding, there's a lot of variety within the wedding. Like when it comes to food, there's a huge buffet spread, and you can
Mm.
expect like the same dishes from wedding to wedding, pretty much like a huge Indian buffet. But I saw a tweet recently that really spoke to me. And it's like, it's not an Indian wedding unless you have a pasta counter and half melted vanilla ice cream. It's like, yeah, no, that's literally every Indian wedding I've been to.
Mm, interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, no chihuahuas though.
Well, in terms of Western weddings, the one in She-Hulk Attorney at Law this week was, I think, a pretty typical one and a pretty
Hmm.
kind of typical depiction of a bridezilla situation. But you just kind of feel for Jen in this episode and how she's completely put upon and imposed on and thought of as less than. And I I think what I appreciated about it is this idea that even though you are a superhero and you have superhuman powers, it doesn't necessarily stop people in your social life from treating you like garbage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Clearly, not only that, but they can also feel like your superpowers and your superhero status is an imposition to them. You know, like
Mm.
it's something that they need to overcome, and might upstage them. You know, is kind of what we're witnessing. So,
Yeah, like it is at the end of the day, it is like also a bodily transformation. It's like you don't necessarily want someone showing up to your wedding who's like, spent the last year getting really buff or losing a whole bunch of weight. Because like, no, no, today's my day.
hmm what a bizarre practice. Anyway, so I'm just talking about Western weddings in general and
Yeah.
how and the rituals around it. I think are just it's odd. That said, I would say my wedding was like fairly unconventional, but not everyone can do that, and nor does everyone want to. Like, if you think Western weddings are amazing, I don't want to uh, throw shade in any way on that. Like, I'm just saying, for me personally, it's not really kind of something that I just think it's a little odd. So Titania
Man,
shows
you're
up.
you're
Yeah.
really trying to preempt a lot of, hate comments from wedding stands.
Oh yeah, all the wedding stands that listen to us talking about She-Hulk every week.
Yeah.
But a few other things happen this episode. Titania shows up. They have as usual in the show, very abbreviated fight scene. Uh, the way the fight scene is edited is really weird. Like, she
Hmm.
punches her, and then like she like cuts to Titania like running out of the room with a cake, holding the top of a cake. It's very odd. Um, she Jen Walters tries to contact Bruce, but Bruce is not to be found. And Jen meets this cool dude. Kind of starts having a good rapport with this guy that she meets at the wedding. So that's nice. Anything else you want to say about this wedding plotline before we get to just the very end here?
No, there's not that much to it beyond what you said. Like she struggles for a second to transform because she's drunk, which I thought was funny. I
Yeah.
like how they,
I feel like they spent all their VFX budget and time on that one shot, which looked pretty good. It looked pretty good of her like trying to transform and then
yeah,
not happening. Yeah.
and again, like her as She Hulk, the CGI, the on the surface, the appearance looked better than it did in previous weeks, and the movements are still off. But I like that we get to see Titania through her very drunk eyes. Like, oh my god, I'm seeing double of four crusties. Um,
I love it. Love
That
it.
was fun. Abbreviated
So
fight scene, and then Lulu is drunk and enjoys it, and that's the resolution. And then Jen is eating fries, and then the episode kind of ends.
yeah, yeah. Patty Harrison, by the way, plays Lulu,
Hmm.
and she is awesome. She was in a bunch of episodes of Tim Robinson's "I Think You Should Leave,"
Hmm.
and was very hilarious in that. So anyway,
Yeah,
always great to see her in something. So.
something She Hulk does really well is drunk women.
Mm-hmm.
Between Lulu, Madison, and even Jen,
Does really well in what sense, Siddhant?
like just the depictions of like the actors are doing a really good
I
job
see.
because like it's hard to play drunk. You know,
I
like
see. Yeah, yeah.
as anyone knows, when we're talking about She-Hulk, we have to talk about one of the acting greats, Sir Michael Caine, who once said that a drunk person doesn't try to act drunk;
Yeah.
they fight to stay sober.
Yeah.
And so you got some good drunk performances on this show of women who are kind of like falling over but trying to stand up straight.
I gotta say that what the show has shown me is that Tatiana Maslany is like an enormously gifted comic actor, and
Yes.
I wish that we got to see more of that, honestly, because
Yeah.
this episode probably shows the most of it, because I think she spends probably the least amount of time in this episode, other than maybe the first episode, as She-Hulk. You
Hmm.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's nice to see, but when she becomes the She-Hulk, the performance does get a little bit lost because of the CG, I feel. So
Yeah.
two things happen at the end of the episode. One of
Oh,
them,
oh,
oh,
oh.
yeah,
Titania loses her teeth.
yes,
That happens.
perhaps yes, that was the first thing I was going to say.
Sorry.
Second thing, no, it's okay. But the other thing is that she is told by Nikki via voicemail message that there are people online who really hate her, and like are threatening to kill her. And I think this is actually a different group of people that are trying to get her blood. I think is my
um,
sense.
from what I can tell, okay, so when they log on to
Intelligencer, the website. Yeah.
Intelligentsia, I think it is. Um, it's a sort of like dark web subreddit looking thing where
Yeah.
people are posting. Well, first of all, like superhero related, videos of like Mr. Immortal, and then there's like this further section where you have to like log in and be approved by um a mod of sorts. What is his name? King Hulk? Hulk King? Just a moment. I have this written down here. Hulk King. One word. You have to be approved by this mod, Hulk King, and then you get to post like memes of how you want to kill She-Hulk, which is a fairly accurate depiction of the internet. But then when we cut to this lab at the end, you
Mm.
actually do see a message from Hulk King showing up to the people in this lab saying, "Oh, we're ready to try again," or something like that. So I think whoever Hulk King is, we're 6 episodes in and we have no idea what the show is actually about still. Whatever. Whoever this person is apparently trying to get She-Hulk's blood, through those people he hired a few weeks ago, through these lab technicians who seem to be developing some kind of drill-like needle, um, but also running a forum for people to try and like kill She-Hulk. So I think this person is involved in like both of these things.
Yeah. Good
Um,
call. Good call out. Yeah.
so in the comics, the intelligentsia is an actual group, right? It's not a forum. I don't know if there's anyone who goes by the name Hulk King, but the intelligentsia, as the name might suggest, involves a lot of like really smart characters, and I think they're trying to reassemble the lost library of Alexandria. So this is very different from what we see in the show. So it involves like all of Marvel's smartest villains, including like Doctor Doom, Modoc, and notably the leader.
Mm.
So I'm wondering if there's a connection here.
The Tim Blake Nelson character from
Yes.
The Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
I do want to point out that some people did write in or tweet at us. I don't recall where I saw this. Of course, you can always email us at decodingtv@gmail.com. But someone did comment that the most obvious person who it might be that's trying to steal her DNA, or who Hulk King might be, is that guy that she went on a date with, who was really fascinated by her. I don't know if you remember that. Remember that?
Yeah, I guess.
Because he shows up in a subsequent scene as well. So it's like, why would
Yeah.
they have him in two scenes
Yeah.
unless he might be significant in some way? So that's what some people are guessing, and that seems like a solid guess to me. So
Sure. Yeah, it could be. I was thinking like, what if it's Titania? Because that would make an equal amount of sense. But so far there have been 2 episodes with minor references to what appears to be the overarching villain of the season.
mm-hmm.
But we've got 7, 8, and 9. We've got 3 episodes left where
Yeah.
I think now it's probably going to start playing a bigger role. Maybe.
All right. Well, we'll find out. Anyway, I think that'll do it for us today here on Decoding TV, covering She-Hulk, Season 1, Episode 6. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to find more episodes of this podcast.decodingtv.com, where we are also covering Andor and The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. Email us at decodingtv@gmail.com. And if you want to support the podcast, go to decodingtv.com, become a paid member. We really appreciate it. Next week, Dan Gavazan will be filling in for me. But until then, he is Siddhant. I am David Chen. We'll see you later.